They sold my mother's house while her tea mug was still warm on the sill. My name is Rowan Mercer, 34, public school art teacher, eldest of 3, and the only one who stayed in our small coastal town when my mother's lungs finally went quiet. The house sat on a hill above the harbor like a patient animal, white clapboard, green shutters, a crabapple tree angling into the kitchen window. My brothers, Ezra and Cole, arrived for the funeral with matching black ties and matching plans. They spoke in clipped phrases, estate, liability, market timing, while I carried casserole dishes and folded the quilts Mom had sewn with her winter hands. Grief makes people mechanical or predatory. Maybe both. I tried to keep the house breathing, opening windows to salt, sweeping sawdust from the workshop, watering the potted rosemary that had traveled with us from apartment to house, house to home. I held the old brass key when I locked the door at night, a key that had been on our ring since I was 8, its teeth worn like a smile. Mom always said, "You keep it safe for me, Rowan." I thought she meant safe from loss, not safe from family. The first wound arrived by certified mail. Ezra's name on the return label, our attorney's stamped signature across the bottom. A notice of intent to sell the property, majority consent required, the language brisk and bloodless. I called Ezra during my lunch break between painting classes. "This is fast," I said. The hallway smelled of tempera and clay. "Markets move," he said. "We should too." "It's not a stock," I said. "It's her house." "Don't be sentimental," he replied, soft the way someone is when they want to end a call. "Besides, we can split the proceeds evenly. You'll be fine." Fine meant the kind of relief accountants admire. Fine meant a check and a goodbye. I hung up and found my reflection in the trophy case by the gym, a tired woman with paint on her sleeve, a woman who still set 2 tea bags at night out of habit, who still reached out her hand to the empty hallway for balance. I could not imagine a stranger in our kitchen, placing unfamiliar spices on those shelves, scraping chairs along that pine floor. I could not imagine our mother's winter light falling over someone else's shoes. The realtor's sign went up within the week. I stood at the end of the driveway, watching a couple in athletic leisurewear point at the porch railings. A teenager stared at the gables through his phone, recording, angling, taking the house into the rectangle of his own life. Mrs. Alvarez, our neighbor, came over with her cardigan buttoned wrong. "They always circle after a storm," she said, not unkindly. "The roof is sound, but grief smells like water." "I'm not ready," I said. "No one is," she said. Ready is a word for the living. Inside, I wrapped the blue willow plates and ran my fingers over the shallow groove in the kitchen table where I'd carved a crooked star with a butter knife when I was 9. On the mantel, behind Mom's jar of sea glass, my fingers found a brittle envelope tucked flat against brick. My name on the outside in her careful script. I did not open it. Not yet. The air felt suddenly crowded, as if the house had exhaled a name and waited for me to answer. That night, I lay on the floor of the living room with the lights off. Harbor bells drifted up the hill, slow and patient. The house settled in the dark, beams giving soft sighs, old wood learning a new season. I held the old key in my palm and watched moonlight find its edges, the brass brightening like a signal. Somewhere between the bells and the wind, a thought arrived, subtle and steady as a tide. If they could sell, I could buy. The idea did not rush, it stood up, stretched, and looked me in the eye. The first open house was on a Saturday, the kind of day my mother would have spent pruning the roses and cooling a lemon cake on the counter. Instead, I watched strangers drift through, leaving little wakes of chatter. Ezra stood by the mailbox with a spreadsheet, Cole laughed with the realtor on the porch, and I moved through rooms like a careful ghost, making sure no one pocketed the small things that were not for sale, the sewing thimble and the saucer, the pencil cup with my childhood initials carved into the wood. "Be gracious," Ezra murmured when he passed me. "Buyers like a soft story." "This isn't a story," I said, keeping my voice even. It's our life. He glanced at my paint-freckled cardigan, the tired knees of my jeans. Stories sell, he said. In town, the conversations had the coolness of politeness. At school, my principal avoided my eyes. The art room smelled of glue and paper, small hands tugged at my sleeves, and I taught color mixing while my mind ran feasibility numbers. Teachers do not buy houses quickly. Teachers buy groceries, replace brake pads, and save slowly. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment above the bakery where the dawn rose buttery and sweet through my vents. I had no savings to speak of beyond a small emergency fund and the careful discipline of saying no to vacations. At night, I sat at my kitchen table and drafted lists. I traced options with my pen, thin lines through thick problems. Conventional mortgage, impossible without a down payment. Private loan, dangerous at the rates I was offered. I Googled everything I did not know, LLCs, title insurance, seller's disclosures, and felt the humiliation of realizing how far from the language of power I had grown. Quiet revenge requires fluency, it also requires patience. I had one, and I would borrow the other. I called the attorney listed on the notice, a man who had known my mother since they were young and scrappy together. He was out of state, his assistant warm but definitive. The estate will follow the majority's direction, she said. Your brothers represent 2 votes. I'm sorry. Of course, I said, as if she'd told me the forecast. At dinner, Ezra spoke about closing dates and Cole spoke about condos. We'll all do better, Ezra said. Mom would have wanted us to be free. Mom wanted the house kept, I said. She said it often. Cole smiled without teeth. Mom said a lot of things, Ro. I washed my plate and left it on the rack to dry. In the hallway, Mom's coat still hung on its peg, light as a shadow. I slid my hand into the pocket and found a paper clip, a peppermint, and a tiny folded square of paper listing paint colors she had considered for the kitchen. It felt like standing at a fork in the woods and realizing the path back had been covered by snow. That night, I opened the brittle envelope and read my mother's hand. Rowan, if you are reading this, the kitchen has gone quiet and I can't climb the stairs. There is a key on your ring that fits more than the front door. The workshop bench has a false backboard. Inside is the record of a CD I kept in your name when you were born, added to whenever there was something to spare. I never told your brothers, not because I loved them less, but because I trusted your stewardship more. If you ever need to keep the heart of this house beating, use what you find. My breath left me like a tide retreating. I walked through moonlit rooms to the workshop and felt along the scarred bench. A section of the backboard shifted, old nails protesting softly, then gave. Inside lay a metal cash box and a folder bound with yellowing string. Bank papers, meticulous, precise, hopeful in their accumulation. A number sat in black ink that felt like a kind of forgiveness. It was not wealth, but it was a down payment shaped like loyalty. I sat on the stool and wept in a way I could not in public, hands over my face, shoulders shaking, the kind of grief that leaves room for resolve. I dried my eyes and called a number from a flyer pinned to the library's bulletin board, a mortgage broker named Jan who met clients after hours. Teachers are my favorite, she said on the phone, and I believed her because the world had made it hard not to be. Bring everything. We'll make a plan. I want to be invisible, I told her at our first meeting, sitting at a small table in the back of a coffee shop. If I make an offer, I don't want my brothers to know it's me. Her eyebrow lifted in a quiet arc. We can place the offer through an LLC. It's more paperwork, but it gives you privacy. I need privacy, I said. I need time. Then we'll get you both, she said. Jan worked the numbers like someone coaxing a reluctant animal from a thicket. She spoke in calm tones, translated jargon into plain language, and showed me how my mother's patient savings could become the center of gravity that pulled everything else into place. We formed an LLC with a spare name, Harbor 17, something that sounded like a small boat or a small business, not a daughter's love. I signed papers with steady hands and a thudding heart, a rhythm that fell too loud in the quiet office where the notary slid documents across the desk. "Do you have anyone who can look over a title report?" Jan asked. "It never hurts." "I have a neighbor who used to work in a clerk's office," I said, thinking of Mrs. Alvarez. "She reads carefully." "Then let her read," Jan said. "Careful eyes are part of the down payment." After school, I carried a folder to Mrs. Alvarez's kitchen where sunlight painted a soft square on the linoleum. She wore reading glasses low on her nose and a sweater with a row of tiny cherries embroidered along the cuff. "You brought me homework," she said, smiling. "I brought you a secret," I replied. "Can you keep it?" "I kept your mother's secrets," she said. "Some of them were simply good recipes." "Sit. I'll make chamomile." We drank tea while she reviewed the pages. Her finger traced lines, paused, continued. "No liens," she said. "A clean chain of title. Your brothers were efficient, I'll give them that. They filed everything correctly." "They always do," I said. She circled a clause with a blunt pencil. "Here," she said. "The purchase contract they signed with the buyer includes a 10-day window for any higher offer to match at full price with proof of funds. If you can match, you can take the table." "Will they see my name?" I asked. "No," she said. "Not if you keep that Harbor 17 mask on." "I dislike masks on faces, but on paper they can serve the good." "I'll need to move quietly," I said. "No noise." "You have a quiet person's strength," she said. "Your mother saw it younger than you did." At school, I graded drawings late into the evening while emails flickered in like the measured drip of rain. Jan forwarded preliminary approvals, pre-qualification letters, the appraisal scheduling. The house appraised higher than the listing by a little, a nod from the market that my mother's scrubbed sinks and oiled hinges had value that numbers could almost touch. I walked through one last open house as a stranger. I wore a denim jacket and kept my hair in a simple braid. The realtor didn't recognize me. Grief can cut the corners off a familiar face. I touched the banister, felt its satin smoothness from years of hands. In the living room, a man in a suit whispered into his phone, an investor tone, clipped and certain. In the kitchen, a woman opened cabinet doors and frowned at the older hinges, a small mercy. The proof object lay warm against my spine where I had tucked it into the inside pocket of my jacket, Mom's letter. Paper can't stop a sale, but it can set a compass. When the appraiser lifted the attic hatch, dust drifted down like soft weather. I waited in the backyard by the crabapple tree. Its branches were bare, knuckles against the sky, but I knew what spring would make of it. I remembered standing under it with my mother while tiny white blossoms fell into our hair like blessings we tried not to shake off. The investor type made an offer the next day, above asking, clean, certain. I sat at Jan's desk for a long minute while she watched my face. "If you match, you win," she said. "But you'll be tight for a while. You'll live thin. You can do it, Rowan, but I won't pretend it's easy." "I don't need easy," I said. "I need right." I wired the earnest money from the CD, the room feeling both too hot and too cold. Numbers moved and my palms dampened. When the offer transmitted through Harbor 17, the realtor called Jan with surprise in her voice. "Your buyer came out of nowhere," she said. "We didn't expect a late match." "Sometimes the right buyers arrive quietly," Jan said, and she winked at me, the kind of small courage that makes larger courage possible. I walked to the harbor afterward, brine in the air like a taste you remember from childhood. Boats creaked against their lines, a chorus of patient bodies at rest. I sat on a bench and read my mother's letter again. Her script was small, firm, unornamented, like the woman who ran a household on careful money and generous time. The resolve I felt was not rage, it was harvest. Years of watching her fix, mend, and polish had prepared me for this. She had taught me that you do not shout at rot, you remove it. You do not curse at loose hinges, you oil them. You do not beg a storm to stop, you make the house ready to stand. I would stand with it. A week later, we met at the closing table. Papers lay stacked like a small city, streets of language and towers of clauses. The conference room smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and tired coffee. The realtor clicked a pen, the attorney cleared his throat, and the sellers sighed, my brothers, adjusted their cuffs. I took a seat at the end, the place where a person can watch and be ignored. Buyer's representative, the attorney asked. Jan slid into the chair beside me, professional calm wrapped in a navy blazer. Here, she said, and set Harbor 17's file down like a flag. Ezra's eyes narrowed. We expected someone else, he said. That happens, Jan replied. Cole smirked. A mystery boat, he said. Fine. Let's sign. We moved through the stack, page by page. My brothers signed their names with brisk strokes, our last name turned into a commodity. I signed as manager for Harbor 17, my hand steady now, my breath slow. The room's air thinned, then thickened again, the way it does when truth sits down at the table. Keys, the attorney said at last. The realtor slid a small labeled envelope across the table. Inside was a new brass key on a bright ring, clean teeth, an unfamiliar weight. I looked at it and felt nothing. Then I reached into my bag and brought out the old brass key from my mother's ring, its edges worn soft by decades of use. I placed it gently next to the new one and watched the room learn a new shape. Ezra stared at the old key, confusion moving across his face like shadow across water. What is that? The key that opens the door we grew up behind, I said. My voice was calm, each word unadorned. The door I plan to keep opening. You, he said. The word tilted. Jan folded her hands, patient. Harbor 17 is the buyer, she said. The rest is trivia. Cole laughed, a short bark. You can't afford that house. I could, I said, keeping my voice even, and I did. Ezra leaned back, color rising in his neck. You went around us. I looked at him and felt the old pain and the new distance. You went around me first, I said. You made decisions in rooms I wasn't invited to. I learned to find another room. He looked at the attorney as if law might save him from consequence. The attorney spread his hands, neutral. Everything is in order, he said. Cole's mouth curled. This is petty, Ro. It's not, I said. It's home. For a moment, no one moved. The fluorescents hummed. Paper waited. Jan reached for the deed and slid it toward me. I signed where she indicated, manager, Harbor 17, ink drying into lines that meant something. The attorney stamped his square stamp, a small thunder. The realtor exhaled in a rush. The conference room became a field after a storm, branches down, sky clearing. I stood, gathered the papers, and reached for the keys. The new one went into my bag, useful for a while. The old one went into my palm. I waited there, cool and familiar, like an answer spoken in a language you almost forgot until someone said your name. At the doorway, I paused and turned back to my brothers. There's lemonade in the fridge, I said, hearing my mother's voice in mine. Take some for the road. Ezra opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You didn't have to be cruel, he said. I wasn't, I said. I was careful. The elevator doors closed on the look they gave me. Downstairs, the lobby smelled like rain. I stepped out into the afternoon with papers under my arm and a quiet that came not from emptiness but from completion, the kind of quiet a house holds after the last worker leaves and the light stays on because it should. Justice had arrived without spectacle. It had made no speech. It had signed its name and gone home. The first morning back, I let the house teach me its breath again. I unlocked the front door with the old key, turned the knob, and stepped into air that smelled of wood and dust and lemon oil. The light came in slantwise through the east windows, thin and clean, laying pale ribbons across the floor. I opened every window and let the harbor move through us, gulls, salt, a horn far out where a boat shouldered the morning. I began with water. Plants are the first bell a house rings. I set the rosemary on the porch rail and soaked its roots until the soil darkened to the right brown. I cut back the roses, wearing my mother's heavy gloves even though they were loose on my hands. In the kitchen, I unwrapped the blue willow and placed the plates where they had always lived, muscle memory guiding porcelain home. I did not rush. Quiet revenge keeps quiet company afterward. It makes tea and sits at the table. Mrs. Alvarez shuffled across the yard at mid-morning, cardigan corrected this time, hands full of muffins wrapped in a towel. "You made it sing," she said softly, looking around as if we were in a church. "It never stopped singing," I said. "We just had to open the doors." She set the muffins down and touched the counter with fingertips light as moths. "Your mother would approve of warm bread," she said. She believed in crumbs as proof of life. We ate with butter and honey, the kind of breakfast that forgives what came before. After she left, I took a bucket and rag and knelt at the baseboards. I scrubbed. The work steadied me. I fixed the loose hinge on the pantry with a drop of oil from the little can in the drawer. I polished the banister until it shone like a well-kept promise. The house responded, boards tightening with heat, the echo in the hallway turning warm. My brothers did not call. A check would hit my account in a week, my third of the sale deducted by the purchase, neat math that would leave me living thin for a while. I rearranged my budget on a legal pad that night and found the places where life could grow small without growing mean. I canceled the streaming I never watched, moved the thermostat down 2 degrees, planned dinner around beans, rice, and vegetables from the Saturday market. My colleagues left fresh apples on my desk and didn't ask questions, they just hugged me in the staff room with that quiet, practical affection teachers give to one another when life rolls over a person's shoes. On Sunday afternoon, I brought a small box from my apartment, the last one. Inside was my mother's jar of sea glass. I held each piece up to the light, blue, green, a rare amber, all of them smoothed by time and friction, all of them small. I arranged them on the mantel in a shallow circle and set her letter in the drawer below, not as a relic, but as a reminder that love works like a ledger when it needs to, and like a garden when it can. The crabapple tree budded, then flowered. Children walked past with backpacks and stopped to smell what the wind had loosened. I grated papers at the kitchen table and paused sometimes, listening to the house settle into itself like a woman into a chair she trusts. I swept the floors on Friday evenings, hummed a song my mother hummed without knowing its words, and learned the pattern of harbor light across the ceiling at dinner through each season. Peace returned not as a chore, but as a companion. In late spring, Ezra came by. I saw him through the screen door, suit without a jacket, sleeves rolled. He stood on the porch like a man who remembered being a boy and didn't know where to put his hands. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Of course," I said, and poured lemonade into 2 glasses. He held his on the cool rim and looked around, taking in the fixed hinge, the polished banister, the small vase of clover on the table. "You did it right," he said, almost to himself. "I did it the way she taught us," I replied. He nodded, still standing. "I wanted to be efficient," he said. "I confused that with being good." "We all confuse things," I said. "Sometimes we correct them." "I'm sorry," he said. The words were quiet, the way truth is when it lands and doesn't bounce. I know, I said. We didn't say more. He finished his lemonade, put the glass in the sink without being asked, and left with a small wave. The door closed, the house took a breath, and the afternoon leaned warm against the windows. I planted a small garden that weekend, tomatoes, basil, a row of marigolds for the color and the old superstition. My hands were not expert, but they were patient. I worked in the soft evening until the harbor bell sounded the hour and the sky went the color of a bruise that is healing. When I came inside, I hung the old key on a small hook near the door where the sun found it in late afternoon. It glowed a little, as if warmed by memory. Justice did not change the town, and it did not change my job. It changed the air in my lungs. It changed the way I slept. It changed the sound of my name in the rooms my mother loved. Quiet revenge is not a storm, it is a hinge oiled at midnight so the door opens in the morning without waking anyone. It is a bill paid on time, a garden planted in neat rows, a light left on above the sink for the next person who forgets their key. If you stand in the kitchen in the first hour after dawn, you can see the harbor through the maple, little slips of silver moving between leaves. The house lives again. It is not louder, just truer. My hands have splinters and my shoulders ache in the good way. When I lock the door at night, the old key turns with a sound I have loved all my life, a small click that means we are safe, we are home, we are held by something that knows our names. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below. And subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.